thanks everyone in the audience for tuning in, and thanks guys for coming on the stage today for this AMA. We've got Carl from the Reverie and Grants team. Alongside the Grants team, we've got the Nethermind and Forta team, and just as a brief introduction, the Nethermind team is involved with everything basically from smart contract development, security audits, L2 research, MEV solutions, formal verification, protocol engineering, and I'm sure many more that they'll touch on and introduce shortly. And then Forta is a community-enabled smart contract monitoring network that's used by a number of projects such as InstantApp, Liquidity, UMA, and Lido, just to name a few. And I'm sure you guys will give a more detailed introduction shortly. But welcome and thanks for coming on to Discord and this open AMA. Again, the community and ourselves are super excited and grateful to have you coming on. I'll just go through the layout today again. Carl will give an overview of all things grants and the recent updates there, and then we'll get into the kind of nitty-gritty of all things Nethermind and Forta and what you guys are working on as of recent. So I guess, Carl, I'll hand over to you firstly.
Thank you, James. Hey, everybody. Great to see everybody here. Got a pretty good audience today. That's great. So as has been shared previously, the grants program is taking a brief little pause just based on having maxed out our funding effectively. We no longer are able to pledge any additional funding, which is primarily just kind of as a means of keeping our existing commitments without overpromising on the funding front. We are still accepting applications and viewing them actively and getting back to people as quickly as possible and discussing and letting people know, if we would be able to move forward as soon as grant V1.5, as we call it, is launched. So once we can get more funding from the community, we'll be happy to move forward. But obviously, we ask that applicants bear with us as kind of work across funding. So we are working on that as well as we take this brief pause, is working on a new proposal, working on new updates and everything, kind of structuring the entire program so that we'll up and grow and come back even stronger. So we shared our retroactive posts earlier this week. Hopefully people had a chance to review. If not, I recommend that you do. I posted it in the grants channel. It's in our website and it's on the Twitter account as well. We just kind of take a look back at what V1 was like and then look at the numbers, look at the grants that were issued, discuss some of the lessons learned, some mistakes that were made, some of the failures, and what we think went well, and then how we can keep growing and again move forward with the program. And then beyond that, we're actively working with our existing grantees to complete them as efficiently, quickly, and kind of in the best possible way so that it maximizes the value to the community and to the protocol. We don't want people finishing too quickly either. We want them to really build the best possible tool or newsletter or add-on or whatever it is that they're doing through their grant so that the value to the community is. And then as we continue to release these, again, we really do ask for community feedback for iterating over these tools and making them better. Our new website is getting very close to launch, which is updating all the data and everything. So that should be pretty fun as well. Give people a chance to kind of look at the things that are getting built and all the grants that are out there in a bit of a nicer way than the existing Notion website. Look out for that. And we'll be sharing more and more updates as grants get completed. And that in mind, would love to turn it over to Forta Nethermind team, who were approved in the last couple of weeks for their kind of smart contract monitoring grants. So thanks a lot for joining us today. If to kick off, maybe you guys can just intro yourselves and then give us a rundown over what you're up to and what you do and what your companies do, and we can take it from there.
Sounds good. Thanks, Carl. Hey, everyone. This is Andy. I lead ecosystem at Forta, and I'm joined by two folks I work very closely with at Nethermind, Lazaro and Roberto. Guys, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, but I think you can go ahead and talk about Forta, and after that we can introduce ourselves.
For those not aware, thanks for the brief intro about Forta earlier. I'll expand on that a bit. So Forta is a real-time monitoring and alerting network for Web3. So our goal is to monitor all contracts, all transactions on public blockchains, and alert both teams and users about important sort of operational and security related events that happen in real time. So in the traditional sort of Web 2 world, you would call this runtime security, right? We're monitoring these protocols and systems as they're running, so in runtime. And this is a very foundational function, for any any team that's managing a network, a software application, etc. But historically, there hasn't been a lot of runtime security in Web3 just because the space is so new. So I guess for those who don't spend all their day thinking about smart contract security, I'll sort of give you a quick framework for sort of how to think about Forta and where it sits relative to some other things you're probably familiar with. So when we think about security, we break it down into really two categories. There are things that you do pre-deployment, and there are things that you do post-deployment. So pre-smart contract deployment, post-smart contract deployment. Pre-deployment, you're doing things like using template contracts, and you're getting audits, hopefully multiple audits. Maybe you're doing formal verification over your code. All those things are very established best practices. Every team knows they need to do that. When you deploy your contracts, your assets, your protocol, whatever it is you're building, bug bounties are obviously a very common security mechanism used, right, to encourage sort of community participation in helping identify bugs and exploits. But the other two pillars of post-deployment security are real-time monitoring and alerting, so watching things that happen in real time, and then your incident and emergency response function. So like when you get a critical alert about something, maybe your system's in the process of being hacked, or market conditions are such that it's generating massive liquidations on your platform, right? Like, do you need to take any real-time action? If you're not watching your system, it's hard to react. And if you are watching your system and you are getting those alerts, then the question becomes, what do you do with them? So there's a really close relationship between real-time monitoring and alerting and incident and emergency response. And Forta lives in this. We occupy the real-time monitoring and alerting layer of the Web3 security stack. And as dYdX mentioned in the intro, we're a decentralized security network. So what does that mean? So there are two components to Forta. There are bots and there are nodes, and they're both decentralized. So any developer in the world can write a bot, publish it to Forta, and the network will start to run that bot against every block of transactions on whatever blockchain you're scanning. So you can think about a bot like a little security camera. So the goal is to have thousands and thousands of these little bots, these little security cameras running on Forta, monitoring every corner of every protocol. And we've got roughly 1,000 bots today, I think, on the network. A lot of these have been developed by engineers on core dev teams, but we also have a bunch of bots that have been developed by random engineers in our community too, that are just interested in monitoring something specific, watching something specific. The other component of Forta is the node infrastructure. The only difference between, the big difference between our nodes and regular nodes is that our nodes are, Forta's not a blockchain, so we're not running copies of a ledger or an EVM. Our nodes are just running the bots. So you can think about like Forta nodes like we're the alarm system sort of behind the scenes that's running the security cameras, right? Making sure that they're always on 24/7. And we have also roughly 1,000 node runners today too. Hundreds of individuals run Forta nodes. And we also have a number of security teams like Open Zeppelin, Sigma Prime, Mixed Bytes, that run Forta scan nodes. And we also have a bunch of professional validators that also run infrastructure for other L1s and L2s. So just to recap, two components of the Forta network are bots and nodes, and any developer can publish a bot on the network and monitor whatever they want. So in terms of who our user base is right now, we are working with many of the major top DeFi protocols across the sort of EVM chain landscape. So I know that some of them were rattled off at the beginning, but we're working with teams like IDO, MakerDAO, Compound, Aave. Really excited to start working with dYdX. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Teams like Instadap, UMA as well. And teams are using Forta to monitor two things. There's sort of two categories of monitoring that teams do today. The first is operational and performance monitoring, right? Which is sort of you're watching how your system is operating in real time, how users are interacting with your system in real time. And then the other category of monitoring, which is a little bit more specialized, is threat monitoring. So monitoring for malicious activity, potential threats, real threats, and then obviously reacting to those things. So what we found is that those teams do a fairly decent job of operational and performance monitoring because they're the experts in their system. They built the protocol, right? But on the security side, it's a much more specialized thing, and so oftentimes teams don't do any sort of dedicated threat security monitoring. And so we're really focused on making real threat detection, anomaly detection as easy as possible, so that every team, regardless of your size and sophistication and funding, can have some basic threat detection in place when you launch. So I will pause there. Happy to take any questions about Forta generally. I want to give Lazaro and Roberto a chance to introduce Nethermind, and Lazaro, maybe also sort of talk about what Nethermind's relationship is with Forta and how we work together.
Yes, sure. So I'm Lazaro from Nethermind. I'm leading the Forta bots development on our company, and we have been working with Forta since the inception. And we have been developing these bots for a lot of DeFi protocols, and as Andy mentioned it, so we have a big experience doing this, and that's why we applied for a grant and dYdX for developing a set of bots. Right now we are developing like 13 bots for dYdX that should be done from 2 weeks from now. So, and these bots, just to stand what Andy said, are not only targeting the alerts that these bots will emit are not only targeting the dYdX team. They are also meant for the community because everyone will be able to subscribe to the alerts and get notifications about what these bots are monitoring in the network, right? So I'm going to move to Roberto.
Hello, everyone. I'm Roberto. I suppose after hearing Andy and Lazaro speak, I don't know how much else I can add. I guess just to further reiterate, we're pretty excited in general to be working with dYdX. And to reiterate what Lazaro was saying, we do have experience with working with various protocols since we've been working with Forta, and now we're looking forward to add dYdX to the list.
Hey guys, this is Andy again. I guess one thing I'll add to Lazaro, made me realize I skipped over this in my intro. He talked about these bots and the alerts that they emit being available for the community, and that is because Forta alerts are by default public. So if anyone listening is, well, all of you are obviously sitting next to a computer or device of some sort. If you wanted to go to look at our Explorer and see what a Forta alert looks like, you can go to explorer.forta.network and you'll see a page that essentially looks like Etherscan, except instead of looking at transaction details, you're looking at alert details. And the alerts that are on our Explorer, again, it's explorer.forta.network. Those are all the alerts that are being generated by the 1,000+ bots that are running on the network. So some of them are very protocol specific. Some of them are more generic. Most of them are monitoring Ethereum, but we do have a number of bots that are monitoring Polygon, BSC, Avalanche, Arbitrum Optimism, Phantom now as well, and we'll continue to add other chains in the future. So we'll pause there. I don't know who wants to pick it up.
Hi, Andy. Yeah, I mean, super interesting, and thanks for kind of all of you for running through that. I've had a few questions from a couple of the team and the community, just with regards to these safety filters that allow or prevent users from being prompted certain transactions from contracts have shown, say, specific agent alerts. They're kind of curious if this is being actively worked on with wallet providers, or at least kind of discussions with wallet providers, and if so, is the kind of idea here to be kind of as flexible as possible by being able to turn these filters on and off?
It's a great question. We are actively sort of thinking about what the individual end user, like let's say the retail DeFi user sort of use case is. Today, our priority target user since the beginning has been a DeFi protocol and their community, because that's where a majority of the risk is, right? The funds at risk are being managed by DeFi contracts, and so that's what we want. That's Forta's goal is to protect those funds, and we protect those funds by monitoring everything that we can, and then giving real-time intelligence to the teams that are responsible for those systems, right? But there are several interesting sort of end user use cases, and one of them is a wallet provider like MetaMask, being able to sort of surface alert that contract that you're about to interact with is brand new and was deployed yesterday. Do you really want to interact with that? The alert should probably even be more explicit than that, right? Because there's a lot of users, right, that are clicking through approvals and signing things really fast, right, without really looking at the metadata associated with transactions. So I think we are exploring sort of how do we get these real time, particularly security alerts or just suspicious activity alerts. How do we get those like sort of more broadly socialized across the ecosystem? And I think wallet providers are a great sort of pipe that can deliver some of those high signal alerts to an end user, especially if they're about to do something dangerous.
Yeah, that completely makes sense. And I was kind of going through kind of your website and docs through this week. I've noticed you've got kind of a governance focus and the Forta Token. That's super interesting. I wonder if you could touch on that specifically.
Absolutely. So a couple of weeks ago, we did announce the Forta Token, FORT. It is not live yet, but we did announce it. And the Forta Token, the primary utility of Forta is that our scan node operators, right? The nodes that are running these bots 24/7 need to stake Forta as a security mechanism. And if they don't maintain certain SLAs, they will be slashed. So that this is because Forta node running is permissionless. Practically anyone can run a node, and so to prevent malicious node runners or node runners that are just not doing their job well. We make them put funds at risk in the form of staked Forta token. So that's the initial primary use of the token. Secondary use of it, something that we are going to introduce shortly, because publishing bots to the network is also permissionless. So installing those security cameras on the network, right? That is a permissionless act as well. So anyone can do that too. And so to eliminate malicious bots and to control spam bots and just bots that take up compute resources but don't actually do anything. We will be introducing staking on the bot side as well in some capacity, either as a hard requirement to publish on the network, or to signal that your bot is a legitimate one. And again, we just want to reduce spam and malicious activity. So the Forta token gives us some levers to do that on both the node runner and the bot publishing side.
Awesome. Thanks, Andy. That's great. Cool. I guess to Lazaro or Roberto specifically, I guess kind of a few things that have been brought up. Just, we know that you guys have like a Voyager that is a block explorer on Starknet that provides information relating to accounts. Is there a non-batch transaction explorer sometime in the future, or is that available now? Just curious from that standpoint.
Oh, sorry, I didn't got the question. And Roberto, can you take it?
I think it sounded like it was was it a non-Forta related question? Maybe a Nethermind specific question. Sounded like. Yeah,
it might be a Nethermind specific question. I know users are kind of talking about that you guys have Voyager, that's a block explorer on Starknet that naturally provides info relating to accounts. Is there in the future going to be a non-batch transaction explorer, or is this available currently?
Oh, sorry about that, but I'm not related with Voyager and project right now, so I can't provide you some information about it right now. Sorry for that.
No problem at all. I guess David, Carl, any questions from you guys? If not, we can open it up to the community for a few questions.
Yeah, I guess like generally speaking, could you maybe like give us examples of risks or attacks or issues that can be prevented through this real-time security, or ideally, like what do you think is the biggest risk to dYdX? That would kind of be solved through Forta.
Sure. Happy to take that. So I guess let me take a step back and sort of underline something I said earlier, which is that there are two types of monitoring that teams do today. One they do a lot more of. So there's the operational and performance monitoring, right? So just watching all the components of your system in real time to make sure things are working like they're supposed to, right? You're not looking for malicious activity. You're just making sure things are working. There's a lot of operational and performance monitoring that happens today. Every team does this in some capacity. And then you have threat and malicious activity monitoring. This is more specialized. It's harder to do. And most teams do not do, there are some teams out there that do it, but most teams do not do sort of dedicated threat, and anomaly detection day. And so, I'll give you a really simple example of like what threat monitoring looks like. If you were to go and look at some of the more recent hacks, so take the Saddle Finance hack from 2 weeks ago, and I think that same weekend, it was 2.5 weeks ago now. That same weekend, Reverie was hacked as well. One of the Fuse pools. And if you go back and look at there's a concept from Web2 security called the kill chain. Basically, what it's trying to articulate is sort of it's the stages of an attack, and there's a framework for this. And the first thing you need to do is you need to fund an attack. then you need to prepare the attack, then you need to execute the attack, and then you have to launder the funds that you've acquired through the attack. So this 4-stage process is traditionally called the kill chain. And it exists in Web3 as well, right? You can lay out a DeFi exploit on this kill chain, right? And so what we want to do on Forta, this is just on the security side, by the way, right? There's a lot of things that teams do on Forta that's more operational in nature, like monitoring you're monitoring all your multi-sig activity, monitoring your governance activity, you're monitoring, certain balances and thresholds and admin events and ownership changes and all that stuff. I sort of throw in the operational monitoring bucket. But on the threat side, this is where it gets really interesting. So if you go and look at some of those hacks recently, right? They all started with some similar markers. And those markers were that there was a withdrawal from Tornado Cash that funded a new contract that was deployed. And that contract then needs to prove the use of certain assets on certain protocols before it can execute an attack, right? So if you go back and look at like the saddle attack or the Reverie attack, you'll see same markers leading up to the actual execution of the attack, right? And there are a lot of generic bots running on Forta that are monitoring for this stuff. And so if you go back and look at the alert history on Forta for those attacks, you can just copy and paste the hacker's wallet address on the Explorer I talked about earlier. Go back and look at the alert history. The first alert that fires is a Tornado Cash withdrawal. The second alert that fires, a minute or two after that, is that withdrawal funded a new contract deployment, and that contract was used to attack Saddle or Reverie. One cool thing that we've done recently is we've started to bundle up these security alerts, these security bots that are monitoring things like Tornado Cash activity and suspicious contract deployments, blacklisted addresses, reentrancy activity. There's 15 or 20 sort of common markers that you see if you go back and look at exploits over the last year. We've taken all those common markers, those common flags, and we've bundled them up into like a threat detection starter kit. And this is available on the Forta app today. It's app.forta.network. You can subscribe to like our threat detection starter kit, and you don't need to do any development work. With the click of a button, you can subscribe to this bundle of bots that are already running on Forta, and you'll get real-time alerts about all this suspicious activity that's specific to your protocol. You just need to specify what your addresses are when you subscribe. It's free right now. So we're really excited about this because we think it's gonna give any protocol an opportunity to have basic like threat detection when they launch, right? Just something that every team needs, and too often teams don't invest in that until after they've been exploited, unfortunately. So, Carl, hopefully that answered your question about some of the common.
Super interesting. Yeah, that's awesome. Super interesting to hear about the common triggers and events that happened.
Thanks, guys. Super interesting discussion. I guess 2 questions on my side. The first is like when you think about all of the contracts involved in kind of the dYdX ecosystem, there's obviously the exchange, smart contracts, and then there's all the staking pools and the governance contracts. I'm curious how you guys are thinking around coverage. I think in total there's probably 30 plus governance related contracts out there. Question 1 is just on scope of coverage. And then question 2 is curious if within Forta you guys have come up with a bot or any kind of use case around like governance attacks, and just like, is that something we've seen kind of emerge in the space, or is it still just on kind of the the technical side that the main focus has been on so far.
David, thanks for the question. I caught the first part, but it was probably just me. But the last, I missed the last part of the last question. Could you repeat that? Something about operational versus technical.
Oh yeah, sorry. The second one was in terms of just like the types of bots on Forta. Have you guys seen like the rise of like governance attacks, and is that kind of an attack vector that you're also looking at, or has it been more on kind of the technical side of a smart contract, not necessarily applied to the governance realm?
Okay, thanks for repeating that. So let me take that last question first, and then I'll pass it off to Zaro to talk about maybe the scope of what Nethermind is building. But if I remember correctly, it's we're focusing on the safety and liquidity module, perpetual exchange, and staking pools. I think that's right. Those three sort of areas. But Lazaro, I'll let you jump into that a bit more here in a sec. David, your question about types of bots and governance attacks. Yes, we do have. So one of the most common use cases for Forta is monitoring governance activity. It can be really basic monitoring too, right? Just monitoring proposals, voting activity, etc. As our network launched November 1st, and so over the last 7 months, the governance related bots have gotten more sophisticated. So there's a couple on there that are monitoring like large token acquisition activity that then participates in a vote and then disposes of that large token position immediately after, for example. Something interesting that we're working on right now too is bots that are monitoring like how quickly a proposal sort of gets pushed through and acquires a quorum sufficient to get approval, and then like for example, this is sort of more relevant for like the beanstalk attack, right? Like, can someone like really push through relatively quickly a proposal and like others not know about it? So like that, one of the values of having like a public monitoring system like Forta and public alerts is like, if you need to socialize to a community that like, hey, something's about to get passed here, and you've got you have a certain window of time to sort of step in and try and prevent this, or at least review it right before it gets passed. Please do so. So I think things like so I think we're seeing more bots that are looking at what we've realized are suspicious patterns of activity. Another thing too that's happening is teams are starting to build bots that are sort of cross-referencing multiple alerts. So you can think about this like machine learning, right? We're sort of aggregating multiple signals together, trying to extract higher level of intelligence from that. So there are a number of alerts that you could get in real time that like by themselves look benign. Right? For example, like going back to the Tornado Cash activity, just as a reference, like nothing immediately sort of malicious about withdrawing funds from Tornado Cash. It's like there's nothing obviously malicious about deploying a new contract address a new contract that's funded by that Tornado withdrawal, right? But if you look at those together, how they look more suspicious, whereas independently they look benign, right? So there's a lot of that's happening where we're combining a lot of alerts together, and like a lot of devs in our community are sort of collaborating on figuring out kind of what signals do we need to group together to generate this higher level of intelligence. So we're really excited, about a lot of the machine learning sort of opportunities that exist once you have this, once you have thousands and thousands of bots watching everything. Once you have a bunch of historical data that you can analyze, you can start to get really predictive with the alerts. So hopefully that answered the last question.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks.
Okay. And Lazaro, do you want to jump in and talk about the scope of the dYdX work? Like I said, I thought it was safety and liquidity module, the perpetual exchange, and then the staking pools, but you might want to confirm that.
Yes, I'm going to let Roberto talk about that, as Roberto is one of the main developers working on that. So, Roberto.
Yeah, Andy, you're correct in terms of the scope, and I guess more specifically within the scope, it falls roughly in two areas. So unusual amounts within regular activity. So if regular activity happens and then we take note of certain amounts occurring that are unusual, then we raise alerts, and that's where some of the bots fall under that category. And then other states of contracts being changed, such as admin roles or things of that nature, we flag those as well when they're not supposed to occur very frequently, just as a informational of, okay, this occurred at this time and now you're being alerted.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Cool. I guess we could probably open the floor up to any questions. I know Starkwhale had a few questions there, so Starkwhale, I'll try and bring you up. I don't know if there's a maximum of 6 speakers on the stage, but we'll see. I'll bring you up and see if you can join.
All right. Yeah, thank you. I've been listening to what you guys are doing. Fundamentally, it sounds like you're doing something that's related to layer 2, similar to what Parsec did for layer 1. Is that correct?
So we are. So right now, Forta's monitoring Ethereum. So I guess the scope of transactions that Forta monitors right now are processed transactions. So we're looking at transactions in blocks, not mempool. So I want to make that clear. And then we are the Forta network is monitoring activity across 7 chains right now. So mainnet, Polygon, Avalanche, BSC, Arbitrum, Optimism, and Phantom. So we do cover both L1s and L2s, and we've been adding networks based purely on user demand. So if we're working with a protocol and they need cross-chain support, we'll have our node runner community spin up scan nodes for whatever chain they're deploying contracts on. So we will continue to expand our footprint. We've been prioritizing EVM compatible chains just because it's easier to do. But we know we will need to support things like Solana too at some point, and we'll start tackling that before the end of the year, I'm sure.
Do you offer user deployable and user customizable scripting for block events, or is this something you're doing on your end?
I heard the user customizable, but I didn't.
Are you? Is this like a decentralized system where users can deploy their own contracts that are looking at the block explorer, or using the block explorer to define and trigger off scriptable events that they have selected, or are you basically building out all the infrastructure on your end and it's basically a closed ecosystem? First of all, second of all, are you because you're working with dYdX, are you working with StarkX implementation? Are you looking at StarkNet? What are your plans for the ecosystem on L2?
Yeah, great questions. So on the first question related to sort of how close the infrastructure of the network is. So from a network sort of management standpoint, it is decentralized like a blockchain, right? So we have 1,000+ node runners that are scanning all of these chain transactions, right? So Forta actually does not run, the Forta Foundation does not run any nodes. A lot of security auditors run Forta scan nodes now, but a lot of individuals are also running scan nodes, right? And so the way it works is, Starkwhale, let's say you published, let's say you wrote 10 bots, 10 scripts, right? Little, I think about them like little security cameras, right? But they're just scripts, right? You publish those to the Forta network. and let's say they're for dYdX. What happens is the protocol will assign those 10 bots to get run redundantly across our 1,000 node runners. So right now we have sort of a hard coded rule where every bot that's on the network has to be run by at least 5 scan nodes in parallel. Those 10 bots that you publish, in theory, can be run across 50 different scan nodes, right? Because each bot's getting run 5 times. So that way, in case 1 or 2 or 3 of those nodes goes down for any particular reason, right, your bots are still being run. So we have no control over what the bots do. The developers that are publishing them are sort of specifying the conditions and parameters and things that they're looking for, right? So it's decentralized on both components, both node running and bot publishing are both centralized, and they're both permissionless at this point. Now there are we do have an API, for example, where you can query, all of the alerts that the Forta network is emitting. And the data source that API pulls from, I think is a centralized component right now. So there are a few centralized components to the system that we will sort of over time decentralize as well. But yeah, practically speaking, the network's really permissionless and decentralized at this point. Then you asked about.
Okay.
Did that cover the first question?
Yeah, that covered that question. I was going to ask just one more thing, but okay. Are you when you're examining traffic, are you examining it on LDL2, like StarkX L2 before it's batched and sent to the L1, or is the block explorer? Is this like I'm just not familiar with how it functions. Are you looking at the post batched ZK proofs after they hit L1 and basically extracting data from that? Or are you looking at the pre-batched data on an L2? I'm really not clear on how you.
Got it. So we're not monitoring. Forta is not covering StarkNet right now. I guess that's one thing to mention.
So how are you integrating with dYdX? Like what dYdX? Are you just doing governance, L1 governance? Is that what your focus is on? Like Ethereum L1 Controller X?
I'm gonna have to have Roberto Lazaro, one of you might need to step in and talk about of the contracts that are in scope, sort of where do those contracts reside? What change do you anticipate monitoring for dYdX?
If I can step in here, I mean, it sounds like what is in scope are the governance contracts, right? The staking pools, which are on Ethereum L1, as well as the perpetual contract, which is really for just deposits draws to the exchange, which is also on L1. It doesn't sound like the scope is on like the Starkware batch or anything like that. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's my understanding.
Yeah, that's correct, David. It's all all the contracts that sit within the L1 on Ethereum are the ones that fall within scope for this initial grant. We can, depending on Nethermind and then Forta's willingness to dig deeper, we could potentially look into that, yeah. But this was kind of the initial scope. Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Any other question? We've probably got time for one or two more. Anyone wants to ask anything, by all means, raise your hand. We can bring you up.
So while we're waiting to see if anyone has any questions, I'll mention that if there are any developers that are in the UIDX community that are interested in, monitoring, something specific, either for your own purposes or because you think it'd be valuable to the broader community, that'd be an interesting sort of input to take into account as Nethermind, is working on this. And like I said, it's the bot publishing is permissionless. So that if there was something that you sort of wanted to develop on your own, this is a test, you could do that. You could do that as well. It's published and it's free to have your bots run on the network right now. So no cost to the dev or to the core team.
Awesome. Cool. Well, I know Aaron has fun. Has got a question. We can bring you up. Hey, Aaron has fun. By all means, ask away.
Okay, thank you. I mostly had a question about the grant process. So, for example, a project like Forta benefits everyone in the crypto community and all the DeFi community. So, for example, if we apply to dYdX grants for building a project that benefits everybody in the DeFi and the DAO community, are those grants still like a match for the dYdX, or does it have to be specifically related to something in dYdX?
Yeah, good question. I'll take this one. So, the main question that we look to answer when we consider grants is how will this benefit the dYdX protocol or community in any way? So that kind of answers your question as to benefiting the ecosystem can contribute to the growth of dYdX, given that it is involved in the ecosystem. This grant specifically, the work that's being done is directly to dYdX in that it's building real-time monitoring for dYdX contracts. Forta and Nethermind obviously are very active in the ecosystem. They work on other protocols, but this grant was to have them work on dYdX specific contracts, and that's how we are benefiting the dYdX protocol and community and grow dYdX. So you can see examples. For example, we did partake in a Gitcoin round. I honestly think that's kind of the only one actually that was more ecosystem driven. We will almost always look at grants that focus in one way or another on dYdX specific.
Is that helpful, Aaron?
Yeah, that was very helpful. Thank you.
No problem. Cool. Anyone else? Probably final question before we close the stage off. No. Is there anything else from you, Carl or David, to finish?
As always, even though we are on pause right now, I hope that people can get inspired from this and submit applications and look for ways that they can contribute through the grants program and just openly to dYdX. We'll hopefully get feedback, hopefully hear from everybody how it's going. We also are super open to hear about requests for other grantees that you'd like to hear from through this sort of AMA setting. So if anybody has a grant that they know of that they want to hear from the grantee, please let us know in the chat. We'll bring it. But obviously I really just want to thank the Forta Nethermind team for taking the time to talk about it. And we're super excited to see the progress and result and help secure these contracts.
Yeah.
Thanks everybody for joining.
Yeah, thanks Andy, thanks Lazaro, thanks Roberto. Really appreciate you guys coming on. Sorry, David, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to echo that. Thanks Forta team and Nethermind team for joining. If there's any resources or docs that you can share with our community on Discord about how they can get involved with building their own bots, I'm sure that would be much appreciated. But very much looking forward to seeing this live in production and providing feedback.
Thanks for having us, team. If we did want to share some reference material to the dYdX community, what's the best sort of channel to socialize that in?
Probably the grants channel to start with, and then I think we can archive it, and our community managers and ambassadors can share more broadly if it comes up again.
Okay, great. We'll do that.
Correct.
Yeah, on our side, thanks for the invitation, and yes, we can share the link to our repository when the bots are being developed. So if you want to follow how is that going, you can go ahead and check our repository.
Awesome.
Yeah. And I also want to echo what Andy and Lazaro said, and also thank you for having us. This was great.
Pleasure, guys. It was great having you on. What I'll do is I'll post this on to YouTube anyway over the next few days. I can share it with you all as well, and then yeah, we'll go from there. I'll close this off now. Have a great week, rest of your weekend. Thanks to the audience who tuned in, and we'll see you at the next AMA. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, James, for organizing. See you guys.